Okay, first thing I want to do is have you, the three of you, in whatever order, and you can join each other. You all started way back, like in the 60s or thereabouts, in the music field, and now we're in 2000 and teens. How is it different? The business end of it, the fun end of it, I hope there's still fun end of it, the way things are operating, the way things get done or don't. Would you rather be functioning today or back then if you had your choice? And
I think I was very fortunate to start when I did. I think it's extremely tough right now. Boy, you have to be fast on your feet. And you really, aside from talent, which you have to have in spades, you have to have so much technical knowledge and also a sense of where, definitely a sense of where you want to go and how you want to get there, and you really have to plot it out. When Ian and I were starting out, Albert Grossman sat us down and said, I'm going to tell you one thing about the music business, and that is that a lot of artists think that they shouldn't have to be bothered with the nastiness of the business side of things. And all I can tell you is, if you don't, there's going to be somebody who's only too happy to do it, and you may not be happy with how they do it. And if you're not involved in the business of what you do, then you're in the wrong business.
Can I add to that? It's a wonderful saying. There's a bad English, actually not bad, they're a pretty good English rock band called Status Quo. They've been going forever. And the leader, Francis Rossi, has this great line: I don't want to hear any complaints or whining about the music business. I understand you chose this profession. What the fuck do you want to do? Drive an ice cream van?
Well, we get, like I said earlier, at Home Roots, we're getting about 200 submissions every 8 weeks. And an awful lot of them are good, you know. And so I end up talking to, here too, at this event every year in OCFF, people come up and say, you know, tell me, what do I do next? And that's that question, what do I do next? And the only logical, reasonable answer to tell any young performer, if they have the chops, if they got it, you know, if your instinct says, yeah, this person could potentially do it, is go find a publicist.
I'm busy.
And in Canada, he's busy.
But you can always put up against the wall and sing to it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's the real problem for an artist is to create some sense of mystification about who they are or who she, you know. And without that kind of professional kind of help, people are in trouble. We don't have enough people like Richard with those kind of skills. And kind of, I've actually talked to governments about this and said, why don't you hire Richard to teach people, you know? And they don't understand. And you know, there's a real lack of problem. So with all the computer gear and all the instant messaging shit that exists, and I don't have one of those machines. And I'm a Luddite and I like it that way. But with all that stuff existing, it still isn't good if you can't spin a good yarn. And that's part of the problem that we have as a community is learning how to spin a good yarn. And how, you know, why should you go see, you know, Chaim Schmidt, who you've never heard before, right? And there's no reason. Yeah, you can see it here. You can even see it here in terms of how the showcases work upstairs on the 3 floors. And you walk down the halls, and there's rooms that are absolutely packed, and there's rooms where one person with a guitar is sitting there. It's because word of that person, even in this community, hasn't gotten around, and so we have problems, and we need to learn how to deal with those things, I think.
I'd like to add something very quick to that. I think this event has, in a sense, grown too large. There are and it's a mystery I can't understand. As the barriers, as the bar becomes higher and higher, as Sylvia said, when she began, it wasn't a clear field, but now as it's harder and harder and harder to get a career going, to gain traction, there are more and more and more artists than there ever were before, ever,
Good ones.
Yeah.
trying
Yeah.
for it. And it's changed what we regarded as success. I think, I can't speak for Sylvia, but I think in those days you thought, if I really work hard, I can maybe get a record deal, I can find a good team, I can find an Albert Grossman, you know, and build something. And now it's harder and harder and harder to do that. And the benchmark of success for far, far, far too many people is, I'm not working at Starbucks.
I think another problem is that in Canada, certainly, there isn't the infrastructure that there is probably in the United States. And that there aren't that many Mitch Podolaks and Richard Flohils available. And they are stretched pretty thin. And you know, certainly all of the money that in the past, not necessarily right now, but in the past has been put into developing a music industry. A lot of it should have gone into development of management and agency and publicists. None of it really did. And you know, if a young artist generally what a young artist will do now is find some contemporary that is willing to partner with them to work, and it's a learning curve for both of them, I think.
I know a couple people who I can't say what city they live in, and I can't say their names, but they're two artists, and they've rented a room, and they put in 2 computers and a fax machine, and they're a pretend agency. And what they do is they represent each other, and they both use phony names representing each other, right? And it's a functional technique. They both put about 30 hours a week into each other. It's a really ridiculous situation, but
Gotta do what you gotta do.
you gotta do what you gotta do, and it works, you know? I'm proud of those guys.
We'll mention that there'll be time for the audience to ask questions of these 3 up here. I'm going to try something here off the cuff. Oh, God, don't do that, Tom. Yes, you can do that. We have 3 people who have known each other for a long time, whose careers have intertwined, who have, during that period of time, probably had questions they've wanted to ask one or the other. Sylvia, you guided me so much during the Touch the Earth years and through your career. I know you are an expert interviewer. What would you like to ask Richard?
Tell me about Lonnie Johnson.
I went to his funeral. It was the last dead body I saw in a coffin. He was a lovely gentleman, and my best memory of him was getting a call at my suburban house then from B.B. King. He said, "Do you know where Lonnie Johnson is?" And because I've never met him, and he's the one guitarist that's, along with Charlie Christian actually, who changed his guitar playing life. And I said, well, I'll make a call. So I called Howard Matthews, who was married to one of the pioneers of the blues scene in Canada, a woman called Salome Bay. And I said, do you know where Lonnie Johnson is? And he said, yeah. I said, well, where is he? He says, he's in my kitchen. So I said, can I bring B.B. King down to meet him? And he said, yep, sure. So I drove downtown in my rusty Toyota, and I picked up B.B. King at a hotel called the Lord Simcoe, which doesn't exist anymore. I took him to Howard's house, which is not that far from here, or was not far. And I walked B.B. King into the kitchen, and there was indeed Lonnie Johnson and Sonny Terry and Brownie McGee. And everyone said, what did they talk about? I said, it's not for me to be in that room. Make the introductions, bugger off. So I don't know what they talked about. Wow. I loved Lonnie Johnson. He was a wonderful guy. I first heard him in England in 54, 5, something like that. They let him into England to sing. And he would confound everybody because everybody thought he's black. He must be a blues singer. And he would do My Mother's Eyes. Do you remember that song? The most appalling lachrymose piece of crap you ever. Right up there with Danny Boy. And people just, and then he'd sing Jelly Roll Baker. Woo. So he was a lovely gentleman, and he lived the last, 5 years of his life here? Had a little club that not many people went to. He was a good
recorded
one.
a couple of albums too, didn't he?
Yes, a great
Here.
album. We can't find it for love nor money with a jazz band. And he plays a guitar solo on China Boy.
On Folk Roots next week on CKUA, you can listen to it.
Version
I
of
have it. I
the
love it.
guitar solo
Yep.
on China Boy is like, whoa, where did that come from? What a great player he was. He recorded with Armstrong, he recorded with Ellington. He had hits in the 40s. He had a long career. Mark Miller has written a book about him, a short book. And I think somewhere in the program there's a little thing which Mark is doing about Lonnie Johnson. He was one of the most influential guitar players in American music history. There.
I have to tell you that this Christmas with the family and friends, normally I play a little classical music in the background, but my son came up to me and said, "We're all falling asleep listening to this. Put on something else." So I put on a collection of Joe Venuti, Eddie Lang, Lonnie Johnson, and the whole place went up for grabs.
Yeah.
Mitch Podolak, what would you ask Sylvia Tyson?
You know, when I first started hearing you guys play, you used to play the auto harp.
I did.
And why don't you do that?
Have you ever tried to tune an auto harp? The last time I played the auto harp was Mariposa had a little reunion show with us at Hughes Room, and we did When First Unto This Country a Stranger I Came, the Mike Seeger tune, and I had not had the auto harp out of its case for years, and I promised it that night that if it would stay in tune that night, I wouldn't pick it up for another 30 years.
Too bad. It was good.
At least you didn't play the hurdy-gurdy.
Well, you have a real solid base in traditional music, you know, and it's
I love the sound of it. If there was one that I could keep in tune, I would be everlastingly
you can
grateful.
weld them in place, you know.
But you have to be very accurate when you do it.
Richard, the third question falls to you, and you can either pick Mitch Podolak or Sylvia Tyson to ask that question of.
Can I
I
pass?
can't believe he's silent.
Yeah. Sonny said when she's going to sit next to me, and if I talk too much, she'd poke me. She hasn't poked me yet, but so I'd like to pass on this one.
You're going to pass on this one. Well, you have the right to do that, sir.
Thank you.
Sonny, what would you like to do next? Throw it to the audience?
Yeah.
Maybe we should take an audience break, and then we'll perhaps think of other things up here. If you want to ask a question, there's a microphone right there. Just go on up to the mic and just tell us your name, where you're from, and what your question is.
My name's Linda McCrae. I'm originally from Vancouver Island, and I'm living in Tennessee now. And I wanted to ask Sylvia, you mentioned you're into Appalachian music, and I was wondering who some of your early influences were on people in the Appalachian world.
Well, Jeannie Ritchie, of
Oh,
course.
right,
Carter family. Definitely, Carter family were a huge influence on me, especially Maybelle Carter.
Right.
And the daughters, too, who I think are all wonderful singers. I think Anita Carter's one of the best singers I've ever heard. A lot of the early bluegrass and old-timey music.
Right. Was there any of that kind of music that was actually coming out of Canada at all? Was anyone?
Well,
I guess not really. They
there were
probably didn't
bluegrass
really have
bands, but it was all very early in the learning curve for bluegrass
Right.
for Canadians at that
Right.
point.
Okay. Thank you.
Next. Wow. Oh, there's, okay, to the mic, please. Name, location, and question.
David Burns, Beacon, New York. Hi, Sonny. We've heard a lot today about the advice you give to young talent, you know, that they have to have the chops, but also the focus and the drive. I would be interested in finding out what advice you would give to young people who are thinking of becoming publicists such as yourself.
Well, it's not rocket science what we do. It is the perfect part of you need a fair amount of chutzpah. You need to have lists of everybody you meet and how to get hold of them and how to deal with them and what they're like. I have a Rolodex on my computer of about 4,000 names, and every detail I pick up about them, and every time any of them does something on behalf of one of my clients, an interview or anything, I put that in there. So I've got like a running record. And like any other profession or trade in the world, who you know is every bit as important as what you know. And the only other thing I say is a certain amount of hyperbole is expected and understood. But if you lie, you will never believe. If you say the Downchild Blues Band is the best blues band in history, or so-and-so is the best band since the Beatles, if you never lied to them before, they may kind of go, oh, all right, we'll go and have a listen. But if it doesn't match up to what the hype was, not only does the artist suffer, but the publicist suffers with that media person. I had a really embarrassing thing the other week. Brad Wheeler, who's a friend of mine who's on the Globe and Mail, asked for moments in Canadian folk festival history for a piece that's going to run in the Globe and Mail, or as I call it, the Grope and Fail, tomorrow. And he asked me, and I told him this story, and that my first year as the artistic director, I had, and whatever the story, you'll read it tomorrow. And then he said, but you weren't the artistic director in 1988. I said, I was so. Then he sent me a PDF of the program. Somebody called Drago Malina was the artistic director. The life of me, I didn't know. I really thought, and I've always thought, that was the year I did. I wrote back and said, well, maybe I'm just going dotty in my old age or whatever. But the story is still valid, and he's kind of excused me for my stupidness and error. And you'll read the piece tomorrow and say, yeah, he skirted around that one really nicely. But I think that, you know, anybody who wants to get in this, if anybody here locally, I'll help them. I'll give them my Rolodex. I don't care. You know? Share.
Hi, I'm Colleen Eccleston from Vancouver Island.
Hello.
Hello. And
Long time.
I've come from the legend of Sleepy Hollow, or that's what it feels like sometimes to be a West Coast artist compared to the rest of Canada. And I've realized that at my age, I have, the glut of the population is my age. So I've decided that that's an asset. But what advice would you give to an artist who wants to go across the country? How do you, it seems to be a conundrum about the way to apply for festivals or the way to make connections with people. But if you're living on one side of the country, how do you make that path across the country?
Mitch has come out with a solution to that, haven't you, Mitch?
Well, she's done our circuit. She's done one of our circuits. Colleen has. We're not.
I'd love to do another one, Mitch.
Yeah, I know. Talk to Tim. But here's the reality, folks. I mean, this is how I'm looking at it these days. There are this many good, talented, experienced, and wonderful musicians in North America right now in the folk world. The gig hole is about this big in comparison. We expect that we're at 16 circuits. And we expect to get to 90 circuits in North America, and then we think the gig hole is going to be that big. We don't think we're a solution. We think we're just part of a process, and I think I don't know the answer to that question in the big, broad sense, Colleen, because the infrastructure that exists is so shaped by everything else. You know, folk music is folk music, acoustic music. We're still a real small part of the music industry, and when sometimes people have said to I've heard the term, you know, the folk music industry. I want to gag, right? Because you know, to be an industry, you have to have jobs and you have to create, you know, you have to be able, you know. And I think that I look at us and in Canada, for instance, and I compare the folk music industry. Now this is all the festivals combined with everything else, the economics. Some of the festivals have very big budgets now, right? But when you add them all together, with all the concerts that happen, right? It doesn't even come close to Max Milk, you know? So what we are is a very, very small corner of the music industry. And the one chance we have is to think of ourselves more as a community and try to help each other as a community. And that is the only thing that only practical approach that I can even think of. I just may be dumb and I'm missing the point. You know, I don't know. I've been asking myself this question for damn well 50 years in some ways, and I don't know.
Thank you.
Rich?
I've had the pleasure of attending.
You are.
Oh, sorry. I'm Rich Warren from WFMT Radio in Chicago, and I've had
Hey.
the pleasure of attending all of the Wisdom of the Elders panels that Sonny has presented. And I always get verklempt when I attend these, when I see you people on stage and realize how much you have influenced my life and what I do today. When I was 13, I wanted to make a career in folk radio, and I realized that dream. And I think back to 1968, I got a job at a stereo store, which happened to sell records in those days, and I could buy records at a discount, which were very expensive, if you recall, back in those days. And the first thing I did was buy all of Ian and Sylvia's albums. I even put them on tape, afraid I was going to wear out the LPs, and I wanted a backup copy. And I never thought I'd have the pleasure and the honor of sharing a room with you, Sylvia Tyson, because your music has certainly meant a lot to me. And to this day, you are a regular on the Midnight Special, and it's just a great honor. And then Mitch Podolak. When I first started WFMT, I'd never been to a folk festival. And Mitch invited me and my boss to come up to Winnipeg to the folk festival. And this was like a revelation to me. And his graciousness and generosity in inviting us to that festival and treating us with the performers, like we allowed to go backstage and spend time with the performers and everything, changed my whole perspective on the whole folk music community, was attending the Winnipeg Folk Festival. And I just can't say how gracious Mitch was in welcoming us and making us part of that community, which was so far from Chicago. And so I just have to say thank you. And Richard's a more recent acquaintance, but when I read his postings, I realize, as he was saying earlier, you know, I know that there's a lot of truth in what he posts, so I'm interested in the music he's promoting. And that's a lot of cred there. So thanks to all of you for making this community what it is. And I personally, I might not be here today if it wasn't for some of you. So thanks so much.
Lillian Wathier, Toronto. I too I was going to say, I want to thank you as well for your vast influence you've had on the whole music community in Canada. It's been wonderful. And I know that, and hope that you all have many, many years ahead of you, but my question on top of that is for all three of you, wondering if there's anything that you feel that's left for you, something that you have not done, that you've left unfinished, something that you have wanted to do and still have not had a chance to do so and would like to. So what's in the future for you?
Learn to sing.
Somebody once asked Willie Nelson if he ever thought of retiring. And he said, all I do is play music and play golf. What do you want me to give up? I don't play golf.
The one thing I've actually started to do is write a collection of stories and whatever, and the book I'm 24,000 words into now is called Louis Armstrong's Laxative and 100 other mostly true stories about life in the music business.
Well, that's my ambition, is to sit down and write a book, and it's taken me about 15 years to logically come up with the first paragraph, and I've done that now.
Once
and
you've done the first paragraph, the rest
goes, and I've also come up with a title, and basically I've been like these guys. We've been fortunate to pretty much meet our heroes, most of our heroes, or a lot of them, and it's people like Pete Zowski, who I got to work with, and be very grateful to have worked with him. I'm going to write a book, I think, about those people who have passed on, who I've encountered. And there's a lot of weird people. Some of them are from politics, and some of them are from folk music, and some of them are from both. And so that's what I hope to do over the next couple of years. I'm thinking about paying attention to what Richard did and going on that website where he asked people for money.
Are you going to write another book, Sylvia?
I'm 5 chapters into the new one.
So, yeah, when you get older, you're right.
I thought it would take me off the road, but apparently publicizing your book is...
Hi, I'm Wanda Fisher, and I do a radio program at WMC in Albany, and I too, just like Rich, I look up here, and particularly Sylvia, I wished I could always sing like you. It was like one of my ambitions, and I just can't even tell you how wonderful it is to share the same airspace. I have a little bit of a dichotomy here. I do radio on Saturday night, but my day job is as a public relations and marketing person. And one of the things that happens as a radio person is that we get things from all sorts of levels of publicists. And I wanted to kind of throw this at Richard.
Are you on my list?
No.
Well,
no.
then we'll talk about that afterwards.
Okay. But one of the things I wanted to say is that there are publicists and then there are publicists. There are publicists who send us something and I receive it on a Saturday, and by Tuesday they want me to have reviewed it. Then there are publicists who send you something and they will actually give you time to absorb it and review it. So if somebody were to be thinking about becoming a publicist for the folk community as it is, as opposed to the folk industry, what kind of mentoring would you be doing to, if somebody were to come to you and ask them for you to be their mentor, what kind of approach? Because you have to be aggressive, you have to be creative, but what's the line?
Well, I have a funny system because I work in Toronto and I don't really get that much into the American market, but people who call me and say, can I pick your brain? Well, what's left of it? Sure. Here's the deal. You buy my breakfast at 8 o'clock in the morning, and that indicates a certain degree of commitment. A, they got to get up. B, they got to pay for the breakfast. And they can pick my brain. And I have to say that I have had the fortune over the last 30, 40 years of doing this, of working with, I usually like, and I don't mean to sound sexist, I usually like to work with young women. First of all, they know a lot more than I do about all sorts of things, particularly now with computers and all that stuff. They're much nicer to look at across the office. Is that a terrible thing to say?
It's a good thing to say.
But many of them have gone on to be publicists. Sarah French, who worked for me for a couple of years, does dozens of blues artists. That's her little specialty niche. Many years ago, I worked very briefly with a woman called Denise Donlan, who became, you know, one of the major figures in. She's doing a television show with that idiot Conrad Black. I don't believe it. I bet she's going to learn a lot of new $25 words doing it. So, as a mentor, I'm always willing to be a mentor. But my rule, as I said before, is don't lie. A certain amount of hype is, and return phone calls and emails as fast as you can. And that's all I can say. And don't lie. Don't bullshit too much.
Don't lie, because an enterprising reporter will always find out that
Yes.
you lied.
And once you've been seen with your trousers around your ankles, the image stays.
And I would add to that the genuine ones answer their phone calls.
That's right.
Yeah.
Your turn.
Hi, Tanya Corbin from the Edmonton Folk Festival. This is sort of mostly for Richard and Mitch, but I'm curious, Sylvia, if you have an answer as well. I've been told many times that if you really want to continue to love music, it's not a good idea to work in it. But you guys are both still pretty involved and pretty enthusiastic sort of music fans, I think, from everything I see. How did you get there? How do you keep it fresh? Like, how do you continue to feel the love?
It's about the vibe. It's about the harmonic vibration. It's about the physical power of harmonic vibration. I don't know about you guys, but I listen to music a lot. And I listen to it in front of two speakers, and I listen to it often alone, you know, in my I have a little snoratorium with a computer for me, you know, like, I had working at the West End Cultural Center, I had the absolute pleasure of producing 5 or 6 years worth of audience sing-along messiahs, right? And if you ever sit in the middle of that, right, and you want to know about, I used to listen to the old jazz guys at the Bohemian Embassy, and they'd say, you know, it's the vibe, man, you know, and it wasn't, I thought they were talking about the atmospherics of the joint. They weren't. They were talking about a physical force that music has that somehow captures, you know, you ever listen to modal tunings on a banjo, right? It will take you someplace else sometimes, and for me, that's what it's about. I love that. I love that. And so, as long as that's alive, fuck, it's great. You know?
Who said it better be safe?
There you go.
Well, my theory, or whatever, is that I go out 4 nights a week to hear music. And we're lucky that in Toronto, there are lots of venues and there's lots of different kinds of music. And I try and listen to as much as I can. I have a huge record collection in my living room, much to my wife's discontent, because they seem to spread around the house. Did you know that if you have 2 CDs and you put them touching each other overnight, there'll be a third one? And it's true. Right? It's absolutely true, provable. So because I'm old, I don't need much sleep, which this week, since I'm involved in something called the Crossing Borders Suite, which ends at 3 o'clock in the morning. Thank God I live only a block and a half away. I can stumble home. But here I am at 10 o'clock in the morning again. Keep listening to music. I cannot honestly say that I've ever been burned out listening to music. Even at events like this where there's so much, or at a folk festival where there's 7 stages, and go backstage, refresh yourself, hang around with Sylvia Tyson, have a glass of white wine, get into a discussion with Maria Muldaur and Jennifer Warnes about over-singing and why not to do it. Things like that. That keeps you going forever.
All right, I'm going to ask our panelists, starting down with Mitch, final words.
We have something, I think, we got something great and unique and beautiful, and we're lucky to be part of a community that has this thing. I don't want us to be snobs about it. Our job is to continue to proselytize this art form and these many art forms that make up folk music. I figure 90% of the world's music is folk music, and the other 10% is kind of influenced by it one way or another. So I kind of think that we have something fantastic, and we often get lost in the wrong reasons for things very often, and it's like why does a folk festival program rock and roll? Because it hasn't, I have lots of answers to that question, but you can turn on the radio and you can go station to station to station and hear drums and bass. I did it driving into Toronto one day. I hit every single station on AM and every one on FM and every one but the CBC at the time, drums and bass. It's like white noise. We are not white noise. And the songwriters that come through our community are not white noise. We have a lot of important things to say, and we have a tradition to reach back to, and we have a tradition to grow. And that's what everybody should be thinking about, in my opinion.
All right, thank you, Mitch. Mitch, I know you have another engagement that you have to get off to. You have permission to run away if you need to.
Yeah, I have to, thanks.
I know you do. Yeah, okay.
Thank you very
Mitch
much.
Mitch
Podolak,
Podolak.
for doing that.
Please corner him. If there are questions unanswered for Mitch, corner him. He'll tell you the truth.
Oh, yes. And now Sylvia, Tyson.
Actually, what I'd like to talk about is not necessarily music. I have to say, at this point in my life, I've probably absorbed most of the influences I'm going to absorb and have set about the business of making use of them. But one thing I would like to point to is service to your art. And I'm a great believer in that if you have a certain amount of success in an area of endeavor at a certain point in your life, you have to put something back in. And whether that means industry associations or working on a one-to-one basis with somebody you think is good, or whatever form it takes, at a certain point, you really need to give back. You need to do it for yourself as much as for the art itself.
Thank you, Sylvia.
For once, I'm going to be really brief. Everything Mitch said, I am in total 100% agreement with. And everything that Sylvia said, I'm 120% involved with. And that's all I'll say. Whatever you do, keep doing it. Keep trying to do it better. And this is life. Make it as good as you possibly can.
Tom, do you have any reflections on what?
Sorry?
Do you have any reflections on what transpired today, or the music business in general?
Nothing that would change anything that these amazing people have said or add to it. You have it all here. I have nothing more to say.
I just have one thing I'd like to add, and that is I just love the existence of this concept of the wisdom of the elders, because we've heard all of these people interviewed on a one-to-one basis over and over. Just the idea of bringing them together as a group, to me, is very special. And whatever region you live in, I'm asking you, I'm begging you, go to the people who run your regional conferences, ask them to do the same thing there. Find 3 people, 3 elders in your region, bring them in and interview them and videotape it, because we are creating an archive which will be housed in the International Folk Alliance office, so that people further down the road will have a chance to examine and to listen and to learn. And I thank you all for coming here.
Thank you, Sonny. Thanks for inviting me. Richard, Sylvia,